Good morning, everybody.
Yo.
Hello. Who got sleep last night?
What the hell's wrong with you?
I forgot where we were, sorry. Good morning. Thank you for being here with us. If you are not here for the White Wolf Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition panel discussion, you're in the wrong panel discussion. It's your last chance before we lock you in. It's not real.
Yeah.
That's what I thought. Wonderful. My name is Jason Carl. I'm a producer at White Wolf and CEO of By Night Studios. And I'm here to welcome you and introduce your panelists today. And they are, starting from my immediate left, Jason Andrew, who is a designer on the V5 Alpha, which some of you have played this weekend or demoed with us. Mr. Karim Mumar from White Wolf in Sweden, who developed the the hunger system in the Alpha product. Mr. Martin Eriksson, also known as Martin Elriksson, who is our creative director at White Wolf. Mr. Kenneth Haidt, lead designer on Vampire 5th edition, and our partner in crime, Matt McElroy from Onyx Path Publishing. Okay.
Yes, I'd like us to just start a little bit on what we've been working on the V5 test especially, or so far, and maybe a little bit of what our favorite part of that work is, what's most exciting. Not favorite clan, that's the only thing you're not allowed to answer. I would also like to introduce to you the absent pillar of V5, Mary Twisted Lamb Lee. Mary Lee, check out twistedlamb.com. She is our artistic director, visual director, a wonderful woman who's worked in the fashion industry for a long time as a stylist. She was the lead art director for fashion on the World of Darkness MMO. And her work is pretty damn spectacular, and she's the one who will beautify and make sure that V5 looks like nothing else on the market. So yeah, we wish she would be here, but she is busy prepping for the Malkavian shoot, I think. Cool, so yeah, without further ado, Jason, you want to talk a little bit about what you've done on the project so far?
Certainly.
What's excited you and so on?
I did a lot of the supplemental material. I did a revision on Kareem's hunger system, worked on the compulsion tables, worked on disciplines, skills, attributes, kind of just a generalist supporting the main designers.
How many of you have played the V5 demo already this weekend? Anybody?
Uh-huh.
How about
Yep.
how about the play test? No. Okay. So we're probably gonna have to explain some of these things as we go along.
All right. Now, there's been a lot of talk about the hunger system. So the idea in V5, one of the core ideas is that instead of tracking blood points, like some kind of magic pool or mana
Gas
points.
meter.
Well, gas meter, yes. You track how hungry you are. Because I don't think there's many people in here who can tell me how 5 blood points feel. Anybody? 3 blood points? 7 blood points? No. But out of 5, 3 hunger, that's pretty relatable, right? I mean, human hunger is nothing compared to the pan-sensory hunger of a vampire, but still, it's something. So the idea is that we track your hunger as it rises, and every time that you use a power, you increase your stats or you vamp out in any other way, you have a risk of increasing it. And the more hunger that you have, the more hunger dies you roll every time that you do a skill check. And these can result in the beast expressing itself in compulsions, making you do stuff that's bestial and vampiric or just simply hungry.
There's another way to kind of think about it, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
How many of you remember the very first Vampire the Masquerade book? First edition? And you remember in there there's the letter from Dracula to Mina, and he's talking about how hungry just drives you, and that's all you can think about. Well, that's kind of what this mechanic simulates in a better way than I think perhaps Blood Pool, is that that's your driving concern. And we've revised it enough to where the compulsions I think will really work. It's an expression that's maybe different mechanically, but it's that same idea from that very first book of the hunger. And hopefully that'll help with the immersion of the players getting involved into it.
Absolutely,
Yes,
absolutely.
yes.
And I mean, it's also meant to simulate. Everybody here, I guess, knows about the adage, "A beast I am, lest beast I become." That's the core of vampire. And having that present in the system, in which you have to resist your compulsions with composure, but as your composure drops, you become more susceptible to frenzy. You end up in that situation where no matter where you turn, you're going to have to sort of express the beast one way or the other. And we think it's a great way to have actually encompassed in an actual system that will allow players to, and maybe elevate players even.
And I think we added in a hunger roll. I think that was Ken's brainchild, which was genius. The little steps of risk that the players get to have in every situation, I could see the excitement on their faces when they were doing the demo. They like that. There's that risk of edging yourself to the.
Yes.
What I found in the demos is that when they say, "Oh, can I use potence or whatever?" and I say, "Yeah, you just have to make a hunger check." And once they've figured out what it is, they roll and they back away from the die. Like they're like.
It becomes a really interesting experience. It's the price of being a vampire. You can choose to solve your problems through non-vampiric means, but the temptation to be a vampire is always there. It's easier to dominate that mortal than to ask nicely. But when you do that, you risk hunger. So there's an economy there for players who like a little strategy and tactical thinking in their games. There's an economy to manage. There's risk management. But if you're a player who just prefers to make the rules secondary and get right to the story, it becomes a great narrative tool because your hunger is always there. You can't get away from it. And unless you deal with it eventually, the beast will get you. So we're really excited to have you try it with us this weekend. And drop by the booth for a demo and try it for yourselves if you get the chance. We're in 501.
Cool. Yeah, I work a lot on uniting different products in different media in the world of darkness. As a lead storyteller for White Wolf in Stockholm, I have now spent way too much time on V5 because it's a fun project and it's really easy to get into and it's very easy to get there. What I try to keep my eyes on is that the systems that we develop are interesting for other formats as well, maybe for computer games, for tabletop games, card games, and so on. And especially when it links to the setting, making sure that the setting is shared between all the different expressions of vampire. Because White Wolf is no longer White Wolf Publishing, we're White Wolf Entertainment, meaning that we are the intellectual property holders of the world of darkness, and we develop the metaplot going forward and make sure that the right parts of that story are told in the right medium. So there's a couple of handfuls of projects that have not been declared because the digital games business is the way it is. They often want to declare very short time ahead of release and so on. But I really wish I could tell you about all of those things and how ideas from V5 are implemented in those different projects.
Well,
but I really can't.
We could, but then we would have to.
Yeah.
Then no one would leave this room alive.
Exactly. Except the guys who were in the wrong room.
Oh yeah, right. They got it.
So
But
yeah, I
obviously-
mean,
Now's your chance.
No,
that's like that. My focus is on making sure that it fits into the greater picture of the world of darkness, and also making sure that the metaplot that has been developed over all these years, that is beautifully summarized in Beckett's Jihad diary that this guy is working on.
I've got some preview pages if people want to see them when we're done here.
And then sort of taking that leap when the setting goes from slightly before Gehenna and the Onyx Path material, which covers how vampires acted during the early years of the 21st century. It's metaplot agnostic mostly, but it does go into things like how vampires are engaged in technology and so on. But the great excitement is to reveal what has happened now 13, 14 years later. I think it's a valid comparison to the Doctor Who relaunch, for instance, that had a massive thousands of episodes that ended between 1964 and 1986, and then there was a hiatus, and then they relaunched it again. Of course, during that time there were loads of comic books and novels and so on published, but to the mainstream audience there was a silence, and that enabled them to restart Doctor Who for a new audience, for a new generation. So they took it back to basics. A man in the blue box and a woman who is taken away from her ordinary life into an extraordinary and dangerous one. And that very core of Doctor Who, that's what they focused on strongly during the first seasons, using a writer, Russell T Davies, who had worked with Queer as Folk and EastEnders, a serious dramatic writer, to introduce this as high quality drama to a new generation. And that is the model that we are trying to emulate, making something that takes you back to that first moments you encountered Vampire the Masquerade for the first time, and that stomach-dropping feeling of being the monster, of inverting the position and seeing what moral quandaries do these blood-addicted, powerful manipulators have. So that's the goal. So we're a new generation, and then as we progress, of course, we lift more and more from the old Metaplot. It's the way Doctor Who introduces the Cybermen and so on. So there's a vast bank of knowledge and beautiful things that we can draw on and pick and choose. Maybe we won't put the Rokea up front, the were sharks, in the very first moments of the relaunch and so on. But yes, I think that if somebody pitches a good enough were shark story to us or game, great game. So yeah, these are the things, making sure that we are consistent with the past, but making sure that it's curated, that this material is curated to be accessible and cool and engaging and terrifying to a new generation. So that's my focus. So questions about Metaplot and characters and so on are best directed at me or Ken, who is also taking a big dive into the world of Vampire and remaking it into his own horrible image. Ken, you have worked on the other side of the field.
Yeah.
You've been doing a lot of vampire hunters before.
Yeah, my name is Russell T Davies, apparently.
Yeah.
The last thing that I did, sort of high profile before this job, was a game called Night's Black Agents, in which you play Jason Bourne-style Burn spies who hunt and destroy a vampire conspiracy. And then I wrote the Dracula Dossier, which is about killing the first, best, and greatest vampire of all time forever so that he can never come back in a sequel. And having seen me kill all vampires and the greatest vampire, of course, White Wolf said, we need this guy to tell you how to survive that guy. So, I got brought on. I think Night's Black Agents, weirdly enough, was my audition. And so therefore I passed it, and now I'm lead designer on Vampire the Fifth. The goal has always been, like Martin said, to take the best and the most evocative and the things that we liked about the first 4 editions, the things that you liked, and make sure that they're present in play, make sure that they're in the space that you're occupying when you're playing a vampire, and to make sure that the game you're playing, however, feels like a game that was designed and developed and written in 2017, not in 1991. Because if you want to play a game that was written in 1991, Matt will set you up. He's got a lovely one. A big, beautiful 1991 game with everything you could want in it. And your Rokea, all those stuff. All the Cybermen, they're all in there. We're trying to sort of go for the people who saw Vampire in 1991 and the people who thought D&D's not the game for me. It's of the past. It's the thing my uncle, my big brother plays. I'm about, going out at night. I'm about this new world of possibility that's been opened up. And we have a new world of possibility, a slightly more terrifying possibility than in 1991, but there you go. And people who are coming into the hobby, people who are coming into Vampire, people who are coming into things brand new and saying, I want to do something that speaks to me a little bit. And so that's why the other half of the job, from the personal horror that Vampire has always been about, the setting is going to emphasize the political horror, the fact that not only are you trapped in a world of monstrous elderly manipulators, also there are vampires there. And so your response to that becomes ideally part of the mechanics and part of the gameplay, as well as part of the story and the theme and the mood and the backstory that it always has been. And we can bring that forward, we can put it on the tabletop, and we can let players engage with Vampire at any level that they want to engage in. They will be able to have mechanical support for manipulation, mechanical support for a plan that you started in motion in 1760 and is now beginning to come to a fruition. There's going to be mechanical support for just, nope, sorry, we just want to go out and hunt and murder hobos all day. Great.
That would never happen. That would never happen. Nobody plays Vampire.
Yes. But now you can, thank goodness. And so we're providing, I think, richer, more immediate tools to do all of those things in hopefully, we are not quite there yet, but hopefully a unified design space so that you sort of figure out what one set of rules does, and it's going to feed forward and feedback through all the other sets of rules, and you'll be able to play it almost in a modular way. So one session you might say, we're going to play all of ourselves, but in 1880, and you'll be able to do that. And then you'll go back and say, now we're going back to the present day, and we're playing what we did back then and how it is echoed forward in time. And that's going to be up to you. It's going to be, all that is going to be available mechanically. Obviously, the World of Darkness has made it all available to you as a backstory already. And so you can go and get your own Cybermen. You don't have to wait for Martin and me to decide to give you Cybermen. You can go grab them, and we will be there on the sidelines applauding you and giving you mechanical support to do it.
I'm so excited about that. One of the things that many players have told us is that they want a way to do flashback scenes so that they could look at what their characters were doing at the Convention of Thorns or during the Anarch Revolt and then shift seamlessly back to the present. And we're working on the way to do that for you mechanically so you can do it at the table without having to invent your own systems to do it.
Yeah. And also maybe bring some sort of advantage to the scene after you've flashed back, something that is a parallel to what you're experiencing now, but in the 1800s. And then you come back with that immediate memory of what you did, and you have the strength to solve the situation, maybe in a similar way or the opposite way.
You're using flashbacks. Yeah, you're using flashbacks to justify prior knowledge of a situation.
Yeah.
So maybe you hatched a plan back in the 18th century to deal with some of those Tremere or whatever, and the plan informs what you're doing tonight, and we'll give you support to do that at your own table.
And we're talking about format for for this. We're planning on having one rule book and 2 setting books initially. That is the format that we're working with now. And that so the 2 setting books, Camarilla and Anarch, both of those will be very light on systems. So if you do prefer V20, for instance, you can perfectly pick up those lore books and use the old 90s rule system for them. But as we say, we're excited to bring the lore closer to the mechanics so that it all fits together. But yeah, that's the format of the books. And in the long run, we think that these lore books can be used in many different ways, like somebody who plays a theoretical computer game, maybe, possibly, based on Vampire the Masquerade, would pick them up as deepening the lore and so on. And somebody who's working on a TV show would pick them up to understand the mythos and so on. So in those ways, they are our Bibles, as well as beautiful coffee table books for anybody who loves vampires and want to know the truth about the vampires among us. So that's a little word on format. They will be primarily photo illustrated, also with traditional illustration, but we do want to give the look of vampires here and now. That the vampires are real and they're hiding among us right here, right now, in the darkest corners of the earth. So, yeah. We're building on the shoulders of giants, and the custodians of Vampire the Masquerade for the last, what has it been now, since 11?
Yeah,
right?
2011.
Yeah, since 2011 has been Onyx Path Publishing. And we're super happy to have a strong and continuing relationship with them, because as I said, we're White Wolf Entertainment. We're a licensor. These are some of very, very few books that we develop internally. Supplements and going forward and so on. We will work with other partners like Onyx Path. So yeah, and you want to talk a bit about Beckett's and stuff going ahead?
Yeah, I was one of the lore and setting consultants on Beckett's Jihad Diary, which everybody knows who Beckett is, I hope. This is his and some allies of his. He doesn't really have any friends, but it's their examination of the jihad and the movers and shakers of the setting over Beckett's wandering the world, and all of their notes on what has led to now. And V5 will pick up sometime after this book gets released. Someone stole it from Beckett, and now it's being distributed around the world.
Oh yeah, he's overjoyed about that. Right? You can buy it at Walgreens now. It's
You'll
awesome.
see a ton. You're going to see a ton of the NPCs from throughout the history of Masquerade, and the terrible decisions they've made over the years that have led to the publication of this book.
Cool.
I think it's fair to say that. Is it fair to say that Beckett's Jihad Diary is the narrative bridge between the editions?
Yeah.
So when you read Beckett's Jihad Diary, you'll have all the Metaplot information you need to understand what happens when the curtain rises on the V5 story over a decade later.
So yeah, I mean, there's a ton of books chronicling this metaplot, and it's very, very hard to get them all and collect it. And Beckett's is a brilliant way of condense it, making it into a readable format, and so on. It's not necessary to know and understand and sort of deeply be immersed in the metaplot to enjoy V5. We're, as we said, we're targeting a new generation of players, but surely it will give you that thrill of knowing a bit more than everyone else as the story unfolds. Maybe a little bit like the readers of Song and Ice and Fire feel when they watch the first seasons of Game of Thrones. It's like, oh, I know who that guy is, and so on. So we hope to reach both audiences for that. So I think that maybe we have chatted long enough among ourselves, because what we're really here for at Gen Con in general is to hear your voices. That's why we have tests, demos, and then that's why we will release the tests and demos with feedback forms and so on. And we try to meticulously read every single comment and take it into account and so on, because that is how great things are made. We do hope to surprise you and subvert your expectations and do things that make you go like that. But it's beautiful and important knowledge to know how you feel about things, what you want, what you wonder about, what you're excited about, and how these systems play out in your hands. So I think without further ado, if you have questions to ask us, any one of us.
Questions, comments, things
Yes.
you want to see, things you
Anything.
don't want to see.
Yeah.
Hi, who are you and where have you come from?
I'm Chaz Mabel. I'm from El Paso, Texas. I was wondering if you guys could elaborate a little bit. I haven't tried the alpha playtest yet, so I apologize if anything's changed. I was wondering if you guys could elaborate a little bit on the thinking behind, I guess, shrinking the attributes down to 3, and if you guys think that'll make it to the final release.
It hasn't made it to the alpha playtest, so I wouldn't
Yeah.
I wouldn't count on it.
Yeah, we're back to 9 in the alpha playtest now.
Thank you. I thought I
Yeah.
was being a stodgy nerd, but I much
No,
prefer that.
no.
Well, that may be.
It's not an either or.
No.
That's still okay. We're all kind of stodgy nerds.
Yeah. I mean,
Stodgy and right.
yeah. I mean, functionally, 3 attributes with specialization is fairly similar, actually. If you have like 3 main specialization of each of the categories, you kind of get 9 attributes anyway. But we thought, like, why not? It's like it's simple to track the 9, but it's not the final decision exactly what those attributes will be and so on. But yes, we are back to 9 again after player feedback. Imagine that. So yeah.
I'm Jim from Minnesota.
Hey, Jim from Minnesota.
The Hawkins papers with the Dracula dossier, I really loved the handouts.
Oh, thanks.
And I was wondering, do you plan to carry like the quality of those handouts forward with the new Masquerade?
Sure. So,
Yep.
I mentioned earlier that I'm the producer on the project, and producer is a fancy word for the guy that does stuff that nobody else wants to do, mostly. But in actuality, it's the person who is working on all parts of the project: scope, schedule, budget, production, which means the physical publication of the books, sourcing illustrators, writers, people on the team. And so when we get to the production, yeah, we have every ambition of making this an incredibly high quality product visually, and that includes things that I can't promise you there will be handouts, but the level of
Maps.
production quality
Yes.
that you've seen in recent years from role-playing games will be there.
But we're not going to dunk every copy of Vampire in tea. That's not going to happen.
No. But yeah, I mean, as soon as late as like three weeks ago, I contracted an old friend of mine to handwrite in the perfect 1860s lettering, because he's that kind of guy. So we've seen a lot of like computer fonts and so on. A lot of them are beautiful today, but just to sort of that our level of ambition is like, no, let's get an actual person who can actually write with a pen the whole thing. So that's I think that I speak for me and Karim at least, that we're like handout fetishists when we play tabletop role-playing game. We love our handouts. So yes, I think you are in good hands. And there has been a lack of maps, graphic material, and infographic layout of some earlier World of Darkness products. And we hope to make this easier to navigate informationally. And that includes things like, coterie charts, maps of domain and so on. So we hope to see tons of that stuff. At least I do.
I do too.
Yeah.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Dan. How familiar is V5 going to be for us old school Masquerade players? Is it going to feel pretty fluid transitioning, or is it going to be a pretty brand new thing that's going to?
I think the answer is going to be different for each individual, because not everybody experienced Vampire in the same way over the last 25 years. So your personal experience with Vampire is going to dictate, at least in part, how you react. But I can at least tell you that our goal is to make sure that anyone who has ever loved playing Vampire the Masquerade will feel that it's familiar, and you'll feel that it is the game you've always loved, but that you're able to play in a brand new way.
I think another thing that's valid to express is that we intend for the game to be more or less recognizable when it comes to stats and attributes. So it's going to be more or less backwards compatible, 90% or so, I'd say. So you're going to be able to use, old modules with the new rules and new rules with the old modules, vice versa, with the minimum of what do you call it?
The
calculations.
The biggest difference in feel is going to be the presence of hunger.
Yeah.
That is going to be different, but we meant that to be different. But building dice pools and rolling them, that's still happening. We're not flipping coins or doing anything else. It's still going to, at the table, conflict resolution will be recognizable to original Vampire players. We're not completely tearing up the ruts and rewriting it.
Again, come by the booth and play the demo, and you'll see.
Definitely planning on that. And then if I could just add one more thing with the hunger part, is the path system going to be similar, or is the hunger going to replace paths?
No. Well, paths, I think. Let me. This is.
So I was changing the subject the other day.
Yeah.
Right? And I was saying, Shabbat, I don't know, man. No.
I was saying that. All right.
I think what you meant to say is, I can't believe the White Sox couldn't pull it out.
I know, right?
No, you see, the
what's
paths are, they're connected to humanity, right? But that's another subject. Humanity, I mean, hunger, you're going to be hungry no matter whether you follow the path of honorable accord, path of power and the voice, the path of paradox, or even just plain old humanity. Hunger is still going to be there. But how humanity and the paths will appear, that's different questions. Maybe that's not something that's included in the alpha playtest, and to be completely honest, we haven't gone into the nitty-gritty of actually detailing how each and every path will be.
The path out of this question, however.
Yeah. But I think that they introducing the Sabbat and making that feel right. It's a beloved part of the world, and one of the great boogeymen of the first edition was like, who are the Sabbat? What do they want? Where are they? How do they operate? What is inhuman vampires? And we do want to keep that feeling in the initial releases. So I would say this is a question of what season will the Sabbat be introduced in a broad scope. And then we will have the paths down to a T at that point.
I think another thing that's important is that humanity will be more personal. You will be able to customize part of your humanity, even at the basic scale, without bringing the path into it or anything. And whether that will make paths into something different or just variants of humanity, that remains to be seen. Because the struggle of the beast versus humanity is still a central part of Vampire, and we don't want the paths to detract from that.
Or to give you an easy out.
Exactly.
I mean, Vampire's about making hard decisions. It's not about picking the path of what you were going to do anyway.
I'm Michael. I'm from Northern Illinois, Cubs fan, so
No.
Boy.
Something that
Whatever.
I really love about the greater White Wolf universe is how rich it was. Like, I love the fact that vampires, werewolves, mages, and wraiths were all existing in this one giant setting. So I want to ask, do you have any plans in the future to re-explore that diverse, rich setting, or are you going to be more focused on vampires?
It's just as you say. That is one of the great strengths of World of Darkness. We have to remember that in 1991, when the World of Darkness was invented, the urban fantasy thing was not a thing. Now it's a genre, and I believe that vampire is one of the great secrets of pop culture in the 21st century, in that it has influenced so many other writers and so on, and so many other movie makers. So for us to now tell the ultimate story about werewolves and vampires and mages coexisting in the shadows of this world, of our world, in a more realistic and maybe hard-edged version than we see in, say,
The Dresden Files.
in the Dresden Files, for instance. So it's like, show them that the original can do this the best. And that means that we sometimes adjust tonality a little bit of the games. For instance, imagine all of them with photographic aesthetics. That means that they all fit together better than the more anime and comic book art style of werewolf and the more realistic vampire and so on. In order for all of these universes to work as a collective fiction universe, they have to mesh together a little bit more. And that is absolutely one of my biggest tasks, is trying to make sure that all of them work together. So now from the get-go, we're thinking deeply about crossover and how they fight over the limited resources of parasiting on the human world, or subtly manipulating it. So yes, there will be boardrooms where negotiations happen, and nobody knows what kinds of supernaturals are in the two different company teams, but it's clear that something is going on. One of the beauties of World of Darkness is that all of these creatures look like humans, and they can masquerade as humans, all of them. And there is that question, who is this person? Is this a powerful, hyper-intelligent mortal, or is this something else? And that uncertainty we want to bring back, especially to Vampire, where the tagline is the Masquerade. How vampires hide and influence or parasite on mortal society in competition with the other creatures, I think is going to be a very strong focus for this game, as in the political part of the equation of Vampire.
Although that said, the game that we're doing right now
Yeah.
is Vampire.
Yes.
And just like in 1991, the other supernaturals exist as question marks or as deadly threats in the case of werewolves.
Yeah.
And we're not doing World of Darkness 5, or at least I'm not.
No. We are, but
Yes.
in the long run.
Next week.
Yeah.
Martin is doing it, but he's not. Thank God he's not telling me about it.
Yes, sir.
So one question. Yes, I know Vampire is mostly a tabletop, but it does have a strong LARP presence.
Oh yes.
You don't say.
Yeah, we're disbanding that, right, Jason?
You're describing using increasing dice pools. I haven't played the alpha, but it sounds awesome, but sounds very difficult to implement as a LARP player.
Sure. Well, so Jason and I have been involved with By Night Studios, which has been producing Mind's Eye Theater LARP products for several years now under license from White Wolf. I worked on the original Laws of the Night LARP books back in the day. And I think it's safe to say that the live action rules for Mind's Eye Theater, all the way back to the very first green box, remember the big old green box with the vampire teeth and the blood capsules? It has never been a perfect reflection of tabletop. They have always made adjustments to make it easier to play in a live action environment. And so not every mechanic and idea from tabletop was ported seamlessly into live action. There's a school of thought that says the needs and goals of the players who are experiencing tabletop and those who are experiencing live action are different, and that live action does different things better than tabletop does, and vice versa. So to expect that there is perfect symmetry between the one experience and the other is really challenging, but I don't think that's what you're asking.
I'm not asking, obviously that you can't have a perfect, perfect line of symmetry, but you're talking about a mechanic that's increasing, and for the most part, both rule sets have done a good job of at least staying in similar scopes.
Yes.
Rather than using dice in tabletop, you use chops in the LARP fairly commonly, and that works. There's similar mechanisms, but if you're going to change out dice pools with chops and have a system of increasing dice, the counterpoint would be increasing chops. And just kind of curious what you guys have given to thinking about and all the parallel for LARP.
Okay.
So as the developer for Mind's Eye Theater, there have been brainstorming, there have been ideas looking at the alpha. We just really can't talk about it yet. I mean, that's really what it boils down to is until there's a final V5, we just, it's not an area we can even really intelligently discuss. But we will, if all the business stuff happens, we will obviously discuss with White Wolf, and there will be brainstormings, and we'll try to deliver the best experience we can do. And I'm pretty confident in that.
I'm very confident in it. It's important to remember, too, that there are many kinds of live-action role-playing experiences. There isn't just Mind's Eye Theater. There are many different styles and methods and formats and structures of LARP around the world, many different traditions of LARP, and some of them reflect the world differently or better in other ways. Have you heard of the Convention of Thorns LARP that took place last year in Poland? We hundreds of players got together to reenact the Convention of Thorns moment from Vampire the Masquerade, and that dealt with certain themes beautifully without any rules at all. So it was just a different expression of the creativity involved.
And we have started commissioning and licensing live action role-playing games that are more event-based and less campaign-based. So they're one-shots, but beautiful, lavish one-shots, like Convention of Thorns in a castle. End of the Line, which was nominated for a Diana Jones Award this year. Second LARP in history that's been awarded, which was an early attempt to make how can you play a World of Darkness game in a completely different way? And there, Hunger worked or Blood worked in a very, very different way, but very playable for LARPs. This is an example of how you make bespoke rule sets. Before you put the whammy on somebody with Dominate and so on, in that game, you had to feed. And you had to feed also from a specific kind of mortal. Like somebody, if you wanted to have a massive celerity burst, you fed from somebody who was exhausted on the dance floor or frightened and pumping with adrenaline. So that it becomes a part of your story that I fuel up on this, and then I do the big, my big discipline use. So that was a way of creating the hunt inside of this techno club with 80 people, 20 of which were vampires, all of them monsters. So that is one bespoke way of doing it. And we love doing different systems for different expressions of World of Darkness. But I do believe that for LARP, it works quite well to ask the question, how hungry am I now? Because that is what should affect your role-playing. So you should know that is where you are. And I think it's lovely to have one of those like targets for your role-playing to say, I'm now ravenous. That's going to color everything. It's going to color every conversation I have and so on. So I do think that it is a useful thing to use, and it can be in any number of ways hacked. But it's a great question, and yes, we will look at the next versions of Mind's Eye Theater, because of course we do want to develop that further. We're strongly supporting the current BNS system, among other things with worldofdarkness.com, which is our VOD.com is our portal for all the things World of Darkness related, and we're starting with Chronicle support for Mind's Eye Theater Chronicles to organize your players, to set, say, age limits or content warnings for your specific chronicle, if you want it to be like a by default it's an 18 plus setting, World of Darkness. But if you want to make like a teen setting, you can set that tolerance level, or if you want certain, so you can do between the sessions play on there and so on. Check out worldofdarkness.com. In the end, we hope that every single product connected to World of Darkness will be on there. Shane DeFriest there in the back is the man to talk to about that. And you can sign up today at our booth 501 in the big hall. I managed to get a plug in.
Thank you very much. Farthest in the back, is it yellow shirt? Yeah, a yellow shirt. There we go.
As a queer gamer who runs games for the LGBT community, what are the approaches and considerations of bringing diversity and inclusion into this version of the game?
This is excellent question, and this is one of the things that we're most proud about with the history of the World of Darkness. It is one of the games that have led the charge into reflecting all sorts of different lifestyles and ethnicities and so on are represented in the cast of Vampire the Masquerade. And that was in the 90s when these questions were on the back burner. White Wolf was clearly a brand that pushed that progressive angle, and we're super proud of that. And even as we tell stories about vampires with terrible values from ancient history, our heart is always on the side of the oppressed. And sometimes you have to tell dark stories to illuminate the situations of the LGBT community. For instance, in Chechnya and other places in the world, there are horrible atrocities being committed towards minority groups. And we don't want to shy away from that. We want to expose it and look at it and have people empathize with those groups by walking a mile in somebody else's shoes. We believe that that is one of the great powers of role-playing, and we will continue a commitment to that. The difference from the past is that we now actually have a world where we can learn about the situations of minority groups or different countries or peoples or ethnicities in a much easier way. And we can also reach out to them and make sure that they talk to us, consult for us, or write for us. So write what you know, be on the side of the oppressed, and expose the darkness of the real world through the metaphors of monsters. That's the methods we have to honor that glorious past. I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Okay, coming forward next.
Okay, hi, I'm Scott from Chicago. Two things. Number one, Rokea NATO. There's your Rokea.
I'm gonna make a note.
That's awesome.
I'm just gonna write that down. What's your name? Sorry?
Scott.
Rokea NATO.
Okay, that's a good idea.
On a more serious side, have you noticed that with the new hunger system that you're talking about, that people are more afraid to use disciplines with their character, that disciplines won't quite be as prevalent because of the play testing? Just kind of curious.
I mean, right now it's difficult to say because the disciplines are not fully out there in the alpha. I mean, they go up to, I think, 3 dots apiece. So it's going to, it's not going to feel the same anyway because you don't have the whole spectrum to look at. The characters are deliberately designed, the pre-gens are designed obviously to have fewer than 3 dots or 3 or fewer dots. So you're already beginning from a position where we're sort of hobbling that intentionally because we don't want to put out an unformed design. But I think in play, the notion of playing your discipline is still going to be just as tactically useful and just as important because you're still going to be fighting, in many cases, fellow vampires who have horrible supernatural powers that you have to counter somehow. And so you're still going to want to use those disciplines. They're still going to be foregrounded. Hopefully, mechanically, we're going to tie them into a lot more of the subsystems so that you'll be able to use them in a longer term way or in a way that makes sense in the sort of whole life of the vampire, whole unlife of the vampire. And so the only difference is you're going to visibly pay a cost. And if the question is, will players feel a little more reluctant to give in to the beast? The answer is, well, ideally, yes, they will, because that's what we're trying to model, is that human part of you that says, I'm not sure I like who I am when I use potence. I'm relatively sure I'm a monster of some kind when I'm protean, and now all of a sudden I have giant talons coming out of my hands instead of normal fingers. That reluctance should be echoed, I think, mechanically, and that hunger system does so. And that's one of the great things about it. And the great thing about Kareem's original idea was that, that's how you you tag discipline use, is that whenever you do, you run that risk of getting a little hungrier. And so I think that to the extent that it limits it in a really strong play forward way, not in a sort of arbitrary borking your character kind of way. I mean, the arbitrary borking your character is what we're doing by just having free dots and the weaker pre-gens.
I think an important thing here as well is that there is never any direct penalty to gaining hunger. That penalty comes the next time you roll the dice. So the idea here is you want to tempt the player to buy now, pay later.
There's also there's an excitement in the risk when you're having to make that decision. What I noticed in the players is they paused for a moment and they were like, "Whoa, should I risk this?" And I could see that their hearts were pumping. It wasn't just I have this superpower, I'm going to use it. It was I'm going to risk this. This is going to be exciting, and I think that will inform play, and that'll make people more into the moment. We had a group that was playing the extreme levels, and they were trying to see like how fast they could get to 5, and they were very excited. They were playing the rowdy, and every time they rolled, they were like, yes, do it, and it was getting them excited. I think it'll be a good experience for people.
I think one thing about hunger that is a recent development by Ken is putting criticals on hunger dice. And that's pretty cool. So it's not only if you roll a number of ones, you do something like you start staring at somebody's veins and like, what are we talking about? It's a hunger flaking out. It's not only that, but if you roll zeros, you get a brutal crit. Like you do something vampirical that makes a massive success, but maybe a masquerade breach. It's like pop off his head and so on. So it's like you have these, so the hunger dice not only gives you a bigger risk of fucking up, but it gives you a greater chance of spectacularly and gorily succeeding. And that's a recent development, and I think it's pretty cool.
An effective vampire is a peckish vampire.
Yeah. If you're hungry, then you gotta...
If you're completely hungry, you're gonna freak out. But being just a bit peckish, having
not
that
bad,
edge,
not bad.
feeding too much will just make you bloated.
And that's where the idea of risk management is part of hunger comes in. So you will never be able to forget that you're a vampire, ever. Every roll you make, every decision that you have to face, you're reminded that you're not human, which is a promise that Vampire the Masquerade has always had. We've just chosen to focus on that and make it part of the mechanical foundation of the game. Who's next? We've got time for just a few more. Okay, still coming forward, and then we'll jump to this side of the room, I promise.
Will the generation system be returning, and if so, how will it affect
Yes. There's no Vampire the Masquerade without generation.
Okay. Simple answer. It's very easy to modify how easy the risk of getting hungry every time you do a hunger check.
Yeah.
It's very easy.
So
slotting generation into this system is actually easier than in the previous system.
Much easier, actually.
Although that said, I think, and this may be something we're still sort of chaotically tangling with, some of what Requiem did with Blood Potence, while it may have been mechanically one way or the other, I think it added more to play, because otherwise, if you're like every time you have a 13th generation vampire, it's like, well, he's kind of a paper tiger. And an 8th generation vampire is always just going to snap his head off. Now, it may be that that's the way to bet, but I think that you get a better possibility of play if you can say, these are this is Gehenna. Everything, the rules are changing, the alchemy is changing in the blood. Maybe you've got slightly better blood. Maybe that's a merit you could have, and the possibility as opposed to the guarantee that an older vampire is always tougher than a newer vampire. That goes away from mystery and away from horror and away from play. And by and large, decisions that we make mechanically, we're trying to go towards mystery, towards horror, and towards play. Yeah. And so we're not, we're keeping generation, obviously, because it is, as Martin says, it's a core of Masquerade. It's one of the great notions in vampires, just the creation of the myth, much less in a game sense. But we need to make sure that we can do that and make the play experience enjoyable and mysterious.
Yeah.
Basically.
I think one way that you can have like temporarily or permanently grow your potency of your blood and so on is by choosing the right victims. That's one thing that we're focusing on a lot now. Humans have been sidelined in the setting for a long time, but there's an intimate and like unseverable relationship between the vampire and the vampire's prey. So how the prey feels, what life experiences they have had, and so on, will affect how that blood functions in the system of the vampire. This is something that has always been the case in Vampire the Masquerade, but we just haven't focused on it and looked at the details of it. Basically, you are what you eat, temporarily and over time. So if you choose to only feed from forgotten, homeless people who are unseen by others and who are lonely and in the throes of the addictions that loneliness might lead to, if you only feed from them, maybe your obfuscate will be significantly stronger than your generation would imply. So there are all these ways of specializing and so on, we hope, so that you can get the surprise with a lower generation vampire that is very, very prepared for a certain type of situations. But I do think that overall, in general, the power level will increase when you lower generation.
I mean, the Bears beat the Packers last Thanksgiving, so literally anything is possible.
And diablerie, guys, it's always fun.
Yeah.
Don't give them ideas. Yes, sir.
Hi, Aaron from Pittsburgh. Kind of going off the generation question and kind of referring back to the earlier bit about offering mechanical support for more things. Can you share any thoughts about other things mechanically you'll do to support kind of the things that elders can do, kind of those impossible shock and awe moments of that's a thing that vampires can do.
Are we talking about high-level disciplines or their web of manipulation and so on? But that's awesome high-level stuff, right. Elder things. How are you guys thinking about elders? I think first it's the flashback mechanic, that primarily be an elder thing. The possibility to draw on experiences past and plans that you did set in motion a long time ago, and now reminding the game master of the DST that you did set in motion and now they pay off. So I think that is one beautiful way of emulating a long, long life, is giving the opportunity to flashback and cash in on that. Do you have any other ideas for elders specifically?
I mean, part of it is that we have to make sure that the basic experience for regular vampires is sound and exciting and has all these possibilities. But the great thing about game design is once you've come up with a system, you can always figure out where the edge cases are. And I mean, the great thing about the elders is that, again, to maintain horror and mystery is they break the rules. And so if we're saying, well, there's just no way that we can get more out of that dive function, so we'll cheat.
Yep.
That's what elders do.
And this, this is a reason.
And will we formalize it in the sense that now there's 20 dots in auspex, and then you can look and see what that does? No, we're not going to do that. We'd never do that because that would take horror and mystery away. Yep. But we can provide guidelines in the rules for the storyteller to look at and say, well, this is the kind of radical rules breaking that would terrify someone. I'll do it. And then it becomes a personal decision. It may not be all seventh generation Nosferatu can do this, but that one seventh generation Nosferatu in my campaign can absolutely do this, and that's his characteristic of shock and awe ability. But if we formalized it and put it in a rule box and gave it a mechanical tie to the rest of the system, you and I both know that tomorrow someone would say, it's in the rules, and I've managed to figure out some bizarre way through the use of freebie points and merits, and it spins around, and my sire diablerized that guy once, and now, and it's like, we don't want to open that door. You only want to hear the noises on the other side of the door and be terrified.
So
I think another important thing is when it comes to elders, we need to think about what they cannot do. As much power as we give them, to make them interesting to play with and against, they must have the Achilles heels. And to make elders always be in some way beatable, because more often than not, they're going to be the antagonists of the players. And there needs to be ways to get around that as well. So not only do we need to think about these shock and awe moments, but there will always be parts of the elders that are exploitable.
Yeah. We think of it, I mean, an elder enemy is a mystery. Finding out what their biography is, what their bloodline is, what have they done. That's how you find the weakness in an elder. You know them. And the powers of a vampire come through their bloodline, from Cain and downwards. Who have they been? What have they done? And what have they drunk? What have they fed off? And that's can crystallize into very specific individual powers. And also to give space for these elders to be mighty and powerful and so on. We are fading them away a little bit from the day-to-day political landscape. There is something called the beckoning. A lot of elders have disappeared, slowly leaving their cities temporarily in the hand of coteries. So as a group of Camarilla players, you could inherit the power of an elder who says, I'm going east, I will be back, take care of my stuff while I'm gone. That's a typical campaign situation. So you can play the Illuminati even as a neonate, because you've been given charge of something. As the Gehenna War rages in the east, more and more elders are drawn there. Because yes, we also create a place, a space within our own world where it's believable for these like seven level powers to be fired off. And I think those are in areas of conflict in the third world and so on, where elders could be those magnificent creatures.
Where the Masquerade is already pretty thin, because you can't believe the news coming out of it already. So it's just, one more horrific atrocity. You don't immediately say, well, that must be vampires. You say, what is ISIS up to now?
Yeah. Last question, and then we have to say goodbye for now.
As far as publication, are you planning on doing independent funding or crowdfunding, or has that been decided yet?
So for Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition, the production and the funding is completely within White Wolf.
Yes.
So this time next year is when you'll see it.
Yeah. Yes, thank you very much for coming. And we're looking forward to getting your feedback. Go test. 501 is the booth. And in a year, hopefully you will see the results of your efforts and ours. And well met in darkness. See you again in a year, or at our keynote panel on Saturday at 2 o'clock.
At 2 p.m. And stop by the booth to sign up for rollerdarkness.com. It is free, and then you will get more V5 information.
Yes. And at the panel, there will be a major announcement regarding V5. So stay tuned for that also. And again, thank you very much.